Welcome back, Village, to another episode of Jedi Learning with Baba Kintu. And today, we have a serious wisdom instruction for you today. And it's on a topic that we usually don't cover, and some people might even be afraid of it. But given the celebrations going on last month, we think it's absolutely necessary to discuss this important topic. And the wisdom instruction for today is: be circumspect when it comes to matters of sexual relation. And this is not your usual circumspection. This is not just don't have sex because you might get pregnant and you don't want to get pregnant too young, teenage pregnancy. This is not just you might catch a venereal disease, you might get something, you might catch the claps. This is way deeper than that. When you're talking about being circumspect when it comes to matters of sexual relations, let's talk about the word circumspect, because even that itself has a couple of connotations that are sexual. When you're talking about circumspect, comes from the word circumference, which means around, to look around. When you're dealing with matters of sexual relations, you have to look around. You have to be aware of what's going on around you. And that doesn't always mean just choosing whether or not you should be having sex. It means to understand the underpinnings of the nature of everything that is sexual and the spirituality that is also involved in sexuality. So you might say, well, what do you mean, Baba Kintu? Well, let's go back to that word, be circumspect. Another word that you might be familiar with in regards to sexual relations is a circumcision. And a circumcision means to make an incision or to remove the foreskin from a male in a circular motion. And this is also supposed to cleanse and to add spirituality as well as some magicality to the person who engages in this particular act. So to be circumspect also means to look around, but also to understand a lot of where the language comes from and a lot of where regular everyday words get their meanings from. For example, a lot of people use the word mesmerize when they have to understand Mesmer was a person. He was a human being who had special techniques used to heal. One of the techniques that he used, that he's most famous for, is a tool where he used different types of glass to make various sounds, and he would use sound healing. But he also had touch, and he would use various types of touch in France in order to heal people. And some of those touches, especially for women who are having either cramps or pregnancy problems, involve touching sensitive areas such as the breasts, the vulva, and other areas that would aid in sexual reproduction. So when we use the words mesmerized, we talk about going into a trance-like state, but it's also giving credence to the person who developed a lot of those techniques. So you could also go into a trance-like state, into a healing-like state, by receiving that type of sexual energy or magic based on the physical touch. Another word that we use pretty regularly is testify, especially when it comes to the Bible, especially when it comes to being in court. These are very serious places. But what does it mean to testify? Where does that word originally come from? Well, testify originally comes from the word testicles, which are obviously the male genitalia that aids in reproduction as well. But there was a period of time where men would place their hands over their testicles in order to swear that a statement or a story was true. So as opposed to putting your hand over your heart, you would put your hand over your testicles and say, I swear, this is what it is. I'm not lying. I'm not making up stuff. This is serious business here. So by placing your hand over that area, you were showing that I am giving you my power of reproduction, my godlike qualities to create another human being. I swear on those in order to let you know that I'm serious about what I'm talking about. So that right there also has those sexual connotations. And then we could come up with another word just for fun, the word caress. That word originally came from another word, carezza. And carezza was a magical, spiritual, sexual act where people would bring themselves to a heightened state during sexual activity without actually bringing themselves to orgasm. So that heightened state and the act of bringing people to that heightened state was known as the carezza, which later on became to caress. So we might talk about caressing this person or that person or even a baby, but the origins of the word caress come from that carezza, which is a form of sexual healing. And just because I said sexual healing, we have to speak about some somewhat modern day discussions on music. And we talk about the Sexual Healing by Marvin Gaye. He was talking about affectional alchemy, or the ability to heal oneself through the magic of reproduction, or at least reproductive activities. So when he talks about sexual healing, he is not just talking about the act of just sleeping with somebody. He is actually talking about mental, physical, and spiritual awareness being heightened by engaging in that act. And many, many people have taken this subject on. If we talk about master teachers all the way from Pascal Beverly Randolph, who was the first person to bring the Rosicrucian order to the United States, but also taught on many ways of using his sexual prowess, as well as using that of others, especially women who were at the time sexually frustrated because they had to stay at home and take care of children, and they were almost forced into prudishness by the times. It could also be likened to something like a what is that series that's out right now? Handmaid's Tale. So when we think about a Handmaid's Tale, women are pretty much deprived of all sexual activity outside of reproducing for a few people, a few elite. So when you think of women coming out of this type of time period, because it wasn't always like that, he was a very, very big proponent of women taking control back of their sexuality. You fast forward to today, you see people such as Megan Thee Stallion, Cardi B, using their sexuality in order to heighten their popularity and their vision to others. And in some aspects, some people may be very turned off by this, say, well, they're being exploited, they're being used, or they're using themselves by not using their higher order skills, or their thinking, or their cognitive abilities. Well, that may not always be the case for everybody. Some people's heightened skills are in the sexual arena, and they should be used for that purpose. Everybody is different. Everybody has a different set of skills, different set of magic, a different set of strengths and weaknesses. So those whose strength lie in the area of reproductive activities should not be deprived of that because a few people say that they shouldn't. So when we talk about those celebrations that occurred in June, the origin of those was to celebrate those who had different ideas or practiced various ideas based on sex. You can talk about groups such as the Shakers, who prohibited all sex, and they actually almost ended up dying out because they were not allowed to engage in sexual activity on a regular basis. But they would go into trances by penning up their sexual aggression and then getting together and having discussions and rituals where they would wriggle and writhe around on the floor. But it was based some on their pent-up sexual aggression, but also on attaining a higher level of spirituality. So when we talk about the virgin, we're talking about a very, very special type of person that is still pure when it comes to that area. And even the word virgin was not always used to be applied to somebody who had never had sex. It was only to somebody who had yet to be pregnant. So these things change and, ebb and flow throughout the days and the ages. And instead of holding this information back from those as they grow, instead of keeping this away from our adolescents and even some children who are becoming of age, we should be teaching this. We should be giving them the knowledge that they need. This goes to older individuals as well, adults, people, in their golden years, because you can still practice a lot of these healing techniques without actually going through the act of intercourse. So we say today's wisdom instruction is Be circumspect in matters of sexual relations. When we're talking about circumspection, we're not only talking about why I should or should not have sex with somebody, am I too old, too young, but we're talking about understanding how big of a role it plays in the everyday functioning of the human being and everything else on and off the planet. There has to be a union between two types in order to bring about that third type, which is your godlike quality to create. And instead of holding that back and saying, you should never know about this, you only use it for reproductive purposes, share that energy, share that knowledge, share that wisdom, because it can only lead to a more enlightened generation in the future. So without any further ado, this has been Babakin 2 once again with another wisdom instruction at the JED Institute of Learning, where we resurrect communities through superior education, and we know anyone can learn to learn. Peace.